Tabula Rasa, I hardly know her. Welcome to Lost All Caps.
It's true.
It's true?
It's true, I hardly know her. You know, this is when we find out about her.
Oh, look at that. It's related to the...
Hidden depths.
Oh my god, so many layers.
So many layers.
That's incredible. I meant that, obviously.
Obviously, that was intentional.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm Ariel Hebditch.
And I'm Velvet Hebditch.
And this is Lost All Caps.
Here we are, season 1, episode 3, Tabula Rasa.
Tabula Rasa. And before we get going, girl, we have had an insane week.
It's been a week. Oh my gosh.
We've had such a busy week.
I think I've been doing something every day, which is incredibly rare for me. Crazy and wild.
Every day. You guys don't understand our lives.
I don't do anything, ever. Yeah, I've been in London doing work stuff. Mm-hmm. We went to London to go to the theatre.
We did indeed.
I've just come back from a holiday. Mm-hmm. Where I went away for a few days with my friends. It's been all happening.
Absolute chaos. We went to go and see one of our favourite comedians as well,
yes.
Randy Feltface.
Randy Feltface, who, if you don't know, you should definitely check him out. He's a puppet stand-up comedian, and I think that's all you need to know. And he's Australian.
He's hilarious.
And he's great.
We went to go see him live, which was really fun.
Yeah.
And also, you got glasses.
I did. I got glasses.
I mean, that's a huge life achievement, and I feel like life achievement? That's not what I meant to say.
It's not an achievement. I failed a test.
Like a.
It's a huge life-changing thing. Like it's.
What's the word? Milestone.
Milestone.
It's a milestone, and we've barely acknowledged it this week because we've been so busy.
Yeah, I've gotten glasses. I've taken them out actually with me quite a lot because we've been going to the theatre and stuff, and I've had them on to be able to see what's going on stage. Yeah, so it turns out I'm a little bit short-sighted. It's not too bad. Hopefully it won't get much worse anytime soon. Although our mother's eyesight is terrible and she was my age when she first got her glasses, so I'm a little bit concerned. But I'll be fine. Yeah. It's nice though. I like wearing glasses. I think it's fun. Yeah. I've always, when I was 10, I remember I thought I looked really nice with glasses on, and so I was like, I think I need an eye test. Turns out the projectors at school were just terrible, and that's why I thought my eyes were blurry, but I went and they were like, oh yeah, you have 20/20 vision, you're fine. And I was a little bit disappointed because I kind of wanted glasses, and here we are.
There you go.
Glasses are nice. I like my glasses. I think they make me look nice. You think they make me look like the nerd emoji.
They do make them look like the nerd emoji.
But I like them.
Actually. So the viewer on Instagram can see that you are not wearing your glasses right now. What the viewer on Instagram can also see is that I am wearing a floor-length, massive black Victorian dress on one of the hottest days of the year.
Yes, and I've dressed much more appropriately.
This was an interesting
in my little
decision
shorts.
for me.
You made a choice.
Yeah. I'm regretting it. I'm boiling.
Yeah.
I'm sweating my ass off.
I'm wearing short shorts and I'm boiling.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what you're even experiencing right now.
It's going to be an interesting episode, I can tell you that, for free. I'm going to pass out halfway through.
Heat
You're not
delirium.
going to know.
And I'm just going to keep talking.
You probably wouldn't even notice.
I'm just so lost in the sauce. Lost in the sauce. That I wouldn't even notice. Dun-dun. So should we get started?
Yeah, let's get into it.
I'm really excited to talk about this episode. I didn't...
Me too.
Going into this episode, I was like, oh, well, this one's kind of it's a bit of a nothing episode. I've actually got written down, one of my first notes was that looking back at this as someone who's seen the whole show, is I was a bit oh, why is this one so early on? I kind of forgot how revolutionary it is that Kate's a criminal. I was like, that's a crazy, huge deal. Right at the beginning, and then you kind of forget about that as it goes on.
A little bit.
You're because
you don't, but
you don't forget about it, but it's kind of you know her.
This is the thing. It's it becomes kind of her personality trait. Jack is the doctor.
Jack is the doctor. Kate is the criminal.
Kate's the criminal, and it's just that's standard. Whereas what you forget is how scary it is for everyone else, because they don't know if she's violent, if she's dangerous. They don't know anything about her.
And even watching it for the first time, I was like, oh, this is insane. But then looking back, I was like, why is this episode so early on? So that's the first thing I've written down. But actually, this is a really great episode. It's got some really interesting stuff in it. I've got some really fun stuff to talk about. And finally, now we've met the characters, we can establish a bit more depth about the characters. And I'm really excited to get into talking about that.
Yeah. It's certainly an underrated episode by us.
Yeah.
Whenever I say underrated, I mean by us. Because we don't I mean, I'm not massively in the fandom online, so I don't know which episodes are people's favourites and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know really. I know people like a lot of the ones from series 2 are people's favourites.
Well, it is the best season.
Is the best season.
Well, I don't want to talk about that because I want to talk about that.
But we won't talk about that yet. So
first thing that I want to mention is the title. So Tabula Rasa is Latin for blank slate, and basically it's like a philosophical and psychological concept that we both learnt about in school. We did psychology A-level.
We both did A-level psychology and GCSE psychology, so we kind of knew about this.
You learn about this, and the interesting thing vis-a-vis Lost is that the kind of it's an idea that's been around for centuries, but
so the idea essentially is that as a baby you're born as a blank slate.
I was going to talk about that
and
after,
then,
but fine, interrupt me.
Well, because you said it's a psychological concept and then you didn't explain what it means.
I'm going to do that in a minute.
Well, I'm doing it. So the idea is that when you're a baby you're born as a blank slate, and then everything about how you behave is learned via your environment. So it's essentially like boils down to like nature versus nurture. It's like the purest nurture argument.
Yes.
Is that you're a blank slate at birth.
And what's interesting is that this is an idea that's been around for centuries, but the kind of the modern formulation of it, the kind of modern
version of the idea,
is attributed to the philosopher John Locke, who is of course a character in Lost. Well,
yes.
he's not a character in
the
Lost.
philosopher himself, but Mr. Locke, who we've met, is John Locke. And
they like their little philosophy
there's
references.
some really fun stuff in regards to philosophy with a lot of characters and cameos and concepts.
Yes.
Because it's quite a philosophical show. Like, in terms of, what makes a person a good person, what makes them a bad person, how you behave under pressure, all that kind of thing. It's really interesting from that perspective and like psychologically. So it is really fun to have this stuff, especially really early on. They're like, this is a thing that we're discussing, that we're like, talking about.
And just after a quick look on the Wikipedia page, John Locke's idea was that obviously the blank slate stuff, but what he placed particular emphasis on was a human being's freedom to be like the author of their own soul.
Right.
Which I think is an interesting idea when you're thinking about Lost.
That is interesting.
Because it's like, I mean, Jack says later on at this point, it doesn't matter what we did before. And it's like, free will is a very interesting concept when you're like trapped in in an island where you can't
in a
escape.
vacuum, yeah.
And kind of like what you do in that environment. I think that's pretty cool.
That's really interesting. And the idea that you can decide, how your story goes. Like Kate, she makes an attempt to change the narrative in not telling anyone that she's a criminal. And there's a really fun line actually in relation to that, like later in the episode when she's talking to the marshal, where he's like, you could have escaped, and then she goes, well, I did get away.
I know, I love that bit, because I'm like, crazy to think of being crashed on a desert island as your escape.
Yeah, that this is it, she's got away and he's gonna die and she's free.
Yeah. But I never get the impression from Kate that she is trying to, like, lord it over him.
No, definitely not. I think she's just saying, like, she is free. It's like she does feel like she's fine now. Which I think is really nice. She doesn't have to lie. We see her lying about her name and her story and stuff like that.
Which becomes a really interesting recurring motif.
Yeah, and so she can be a bit more honest now. And write her own, or be the author of her own soul.
Of her own soul.
That kind of sounds like something that would be on like a picture of a sunset.
It does.
You can be the author of your own soul.
Hyphen John Locke.
Yeah. We should make those.
It's a picture
posters
of him on the beach, like
holding the little
what
are they called? The counters?
Yeah.
For the game? I don't know. Anyway.
So, excitingly, this episode has our first previously on Lost.
Yeah.
So exciting.
Our first previously on. The previously ons are a really funny concept because they often will bring up a flashback of something that happened 10 episodes ago that never got explained. And then you'll be like, okay, we're finally going to get some more of this. That's nice.
Obviously, I mean, I don't know if we've talked about it yet on the podcast, but one thing that's really interesting about Lost is, like, the the show's format
Yeah.
and when it came out. So obviously we're talking early 2000s here. It's like a serial show, so one episode is being released each week. So they have to have the previously on to remind you
what happened, because
hey,
it's like, yeah, this thing happened 5 episodes ago. If you're just watching it back to back, that's not a big deal. That happened yesterday. But if it happened 5 weeks ago, you're not necessarily going to remember it.
Yeah. But one thing that I think is really fascinating about the show is how it almost predicts streaming formats.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. Watching this, having watched things like Stranger Things and Umbrella Academy and big like Netflix blockbusters that are designed to be binged, like watching this, having seen that, you can really see how Lost was essentially the foundation for all of those shows.
Completely. It's definitely bingeable, and it's got that kind of like overarching arc, but what I really like about it is that it has like each of the episodes has its own enclosed narrative.
Yeah, there are still closed narratives within the episode, some more so than others. Some have like very specific stories within them, some are a bit more just like carrying on the story. But I really like that, and they've got something great that is different about Lost in comparison to bigger like blockbusters and things that are more recent, is there's a lot more filler, which is really nice. There's
nice.
filler episodes, and there's, you know,
like goofy stuff.
There's silly stuff. There's like scenes that aren't really relevant to the plot, and things that are just the characters having fun and talking to each other. And that's so really important. Nice. And it's longer, you know, there's 22 episodes in most of the seasons. Some of them have shorter. And that, you know, more than just having 8 episodes, like it's really nice to have that time to get to know these characters.
Completely agree. I think it's one of the things that I and many on the internet, as I've seen, mourn the loss of in terms of streaming
absolutely.
culture.
I really mourn the loss of filler. I love filler. It's really nice. Because I love characters. Like it sounds really stupid to be like, I love characters.
I'm such a character girly.
But like, it's something I notice in a lot of media I enjoy, is that I really focus on the characters. And if they're not likeable, I can't enjoy the media. And I know a lot of people feel differently. A lot of people really like a good, like, you know, a horrible protagonist that they don't really like, but like I'm always really focused on the characters, and I think having that filler is really nice to be getting to know the characters and getting to see them, which is, you know, obviously nice.
I mean, it's very interesting when you think about Lost, because we obviously have a lot of complex characters in this show, you know. I'd argue that Jack is not entirely likeable.
No, he's not. He definitely does things that you go like, whoa.
At this point, I mean, we're only on episode 3. At this point, he's pretty much, you're on his side.
Yeah.
But there is
he has his moments later on. Yeah, he's not entirely like, but it's one of those things where a lot of the characters, especially like especially my favourites, they have like the one thing that they've done that you're like, And I think that's really nice to have. There aren't any like concretely perfect people. There isn't any character that you're like, oh, but they're just perfect, they've never done anything wrong. Yeah. And then like the jokey, like he's never done anything wrong ever in his life, but he's committed war crimes. Like, you have that.
Oh, definitely.
You have that stuff. You have like, I support women's rights and women's wrongs.
Yeah.
But you don't have, and you don't, it's funny, the longer it goes on, the less you hold them to that same moral standard you have in everyday life.
So true.
Like, the less you'll be criticising them based on, you know, like I said, oh, she's a criminal, and you're like, yeah, we know that.
Yeah.
Like, but now, right in the beginning, you are holding them to those same standards, and it's a lot more, it's like the littler things are a lot more shaping your perspective on the characters than like later on. Which is really, really fun.
Yeah, no, I really like that there's no kind of black and white morals in this show.
And I actually have a point to make about that a bit later on, but I will say it's like the end of the episode, so I'll save it.
Okay, fair enough.
But I will be circling back to this conversation.
We don't have to go chronologically, you know, we can fuck shit up.
Okay, well, I'll talk about it now then.
Okay.
So this is my main, so...
You can save it if you want.
No, I want to talk about it now.
Okay.
So, immediately after, like, we see Kate saving the farmer from the truck, and almost straight after, but almost immediately after, we have Jack killing the marshal. And I think that is a really interesting, like, dichotomy of these two characters who are, like, one of them is... Jack is, at this point, where, like, he's the hero, he's the good person.
Yeah.
Kate is bad. She's a criminal, you know. And we don't know what she's done yet, but we know she's a criminal, she's bad. There's Marshall, and like to have a Marshall on your tail is a big thing. So she must have done something. And then we have this really nice gesture, this really, like, you know, she's a good person because she's saved the farmer from the burning truck, and even the marshal says, like, she could have run away and she could have left him there. And then we have Jack, who has to kill a man, and of course it's like, it's to put him out of his misery, and we know that he had to do it. But I thought that was just like a really amazing, like, that maybe they're all the same at the end of the day, you know? Maybe they're not good and evil. They all have to do things, and they have to do things even if they don't necessarily want to do them. Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. I never thought about that as a parallel.
And I think, like, Kate and Jack get pitted kind of against each other a lot. Like, not pitted. They don't fight, but they get, like presented as like a duo a lot for a lot of the show. And so you get these really interesting dynamics between them, of them being the kind of the good and the bad, and with Sawyer as well, that they get put together. We see them kind of put together as a trio for one of the first times in this episode, and that we get that kind of this parallel of, like, who is really the bad person here, who is really, like, the criminal. Are these crimes really as bad as we're led to believe? Because are they good people or not? And, you know, I'm not saying Jack is a bad person for killing the marshal, because we know it's a thing.
But it's complex, and that's the whole point.
But it's complicated because, yes, it's putting him out of his misery, and it's saving him from, like, hours of bleeding out or even days of succumbing to infection. But it's still
But then you have that
killing
scene
him.
between Jack and Kate where he, like, yells, "I saw your headshot, I'm not a murderer."
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. And, like, it's in the rain and everything. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's so great scene. Oh, wonderful.
It's that, yeah. Because it's that journey that Jack goes on across this episode of being, like, suddenly really against Kate, even though they've done all this stuff together. And, like, immediately jumping to thinking she wants him dead because he was chasing her. Yeah. She wants the marshal dead. Like, I think that's kind of what he assumes in that conversation, is that she's trying to be like, you have to put him out of his misery, because she doesn't want him, like, spreading it that she's a criminal.
Everyone, yeah. But that's completely not true.
But it's not. And that's what Jack comes to learn.
Yes.
Is that actually sometimes it is the right thing to do the thing that you think is bad.
I love that as well, because, like, Hurley assumes that as well, that she's got a gun and everything, and Jack's running to the tent and everything. But, like, it's really interesting, because Kate does not want to kill the marshal.
No.
She's not like, now, finally I can have my vengeance, points a gun at him, and is like, I have the upper hand.
That conversation between the two of them, there's, like, no malicious kind of feeling from Kate.
No.
Like,
despite the fact that this man is, like, ruining her life.
Yeah, and that he was, and all this time, you know, even when the plane starts crashing, she puts the oxygen mask on him, and she's trying to keep him alive. And I think that's a really interesting thing from Kate, is that she, and, you know.
But here's the other thing I was going to say, though. I still do think it's kind of cruel that she makes Sawyer shoot him. Because it's like, if you think he should be put out of his misery, maybe you should do it. And also, once you get to know Sawyer's backstory, that's a huge moment for him.
That is a really big deal for him. And this is actually, like, I don't like Sawyer.
No, we hate Sawyer.
We don't like Sawyer, but this is a really kind of a moment where I really feel for him, and I really do like him for that moment of...
And I think...
wanting to put him out of his misery, and that he just, like... It's that, like, when Jack says, like, it's going to take him hours to bleed out. Like, he does look genuinely so remorseful about it, which is really, really heartbreaking.
It's the first kind of moment of vulnerability you get.
Yeah,
because he's just been an arsehole this entire time. But yeah, that moment, and where he's, like, struggling to light the cigarette as well. I think Josh Holloway's such an excellent actor. And he
such a brilliant actor. That. He really does an amazing job this episode. Because even in that conversation between Sawyer and Kate, where he's saying, like, someone's going to have to shoot him... Even that's a bit of an arsey thing. Completely, like, the way he goes about it is definitely an arsey thing to say. But then that final moment where he actually has to confront that, it's really something, and it's really powerful.
He has to eat his own words almost.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then, of course, we get the moment, we'll circle back to this, I'm sure, but the moment, there's, like, a little moment between Saeed and Sawyer right at the end,
yes.
where Saeed throws him the apple, and it's this kind of this moment of like, we're all in this together now.
We need to unpack that
But we will come back to that later.
That is a serious business.
Immediately post Sawyer kind of showing a bit of vulnerability, we then get a bit more connection from him, which I think is a really nice narrative for him.
Totally. And they did that well in the editing and stuff.
Yes, 100%.
My first note that I've made while watching this episode is just Marshall in all caps with 7 L's. Right, I didn't get to talk properly on the last episode about how much I love the Marshall.
Ariel is a huge Marshall fan.
The Marshall is great! He's just such an interesting character. I'm like, I think he's so cool. And I didn't get the chance to properly say last time because I didn't want to spoil the fact that he dies. But if he had survived, how fucking cool would that have been? Imagine the dynamic.
It would be so interesting.
Between him and Kate when they're in this vacuum of the island.
It's so interesting because also it's like from Kate's perspective, she seems to have kind of put it all to bed. Like immediately post plane crash, she seems to have kind of just gone, well, that's behind me now. I don't have to run anymore. I can, do this regular stuff and I can help people. But the Marshal, even in dying, is so obsessed with finding her and so obsessed with making sure that everyone knows that she's a criminal and she's dangerous that he would, like, even if he had survived, he wouldn't be able to put that behind him. He wouldn't be able to go.
Her.
He would be chaining her to a tree. He'd be like, she can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And it would be very interesting.
So good. I think they should let him live. This is the hill I'll die on. I think they should have let the Marshal live because it would have been so fucking cool. And also, he just seems like a really interesting guy because
he is a very interesting character because he's so obsessed with her.
Yeah, what you were saying about like, I can't get on board if the characters aren't likable. It's like, but I think he's a really good villain. I think he is
a very good villain.
He's very evil in a way, I think.
Yeah, and it's also this idea of like, again, the good versus evil because it's like he's quite evil, but he's the police.
He's the police.
Kate's the criminal, and he's the police officer, and he's supposed to be the good guy, but he's actually quite...
We're definitely not rooting for him.
Like, you don't like him. You don't like the Marshal. And it's like, it is really interesting. I know you like him, but you know what I mean. Way. Like, you wouldn't like him if you met him, you know?
Yes, definitely.
Sorry, my earrings caught him.
But yeah, I just think that he's like...
He's a very interesting character.
So interesting. And the fact that he's also so vulnerable when he had so much power before.
Yeah.
And he's just like, you see how injured he is in this episode. And it's really like, it's just a really striking reversal of how someone with all of the authority can suddenly be taken down.
Yeah, it's one of those things of like, none of us, like, at the end of the day, everyone is susceptible to being hurt.
Everyone's human being.
It's this thing of like, you could spend all your time trying to live a perfect life and then you could walk outside and get hit by a bus. Like, everyone is a human being. No one is untouchable.
Is that an expression?
Well, not an expression, but it's one of those things of like, like people who are really obsessed with anti-aging and they're like, do all these skincare things and these creams and then drink with this anti-wrinkle straw and then it's like, you could go and get run over. You don't need to...
Well, I don't understand. I don't
You never heard
the
that?
point of this, no.
So the point is that, like, you're trying so hard to extend your life.
Yeah.
And if you're really obsessed with your health and not aging and doing all these things, like Chris from Parks and Rec, like, you're really obsessed with being, like, healthy. And, like, obviously everyone should be trying to be healthy, but, like, you can do all these things and you can have all this... Or you can have all this power, but nobody is untouchable.
Yeah.
Nobody is not susceptible to getting a disease or to,
I get what you mean. I think you threw me with the anti-aging creams because I was like, surely that's like a vanity thing. So, that's like, I don't want to appear old rather than...
The anti-aging thing, it's like a separate facet of the same concept. So it's like the health and the power and the anti-aging stuff. It's all like a similar thing, but at the end of the day, the point is like at the end of the day, you could just die, and you don't know.
Yeah.
That's the kind of point I'm getting at.
Okay.
Maybe I shouldn't have brought in the anti-aging thing.
No, I don't think you should have.
But yeah, no, it's that thing. But also what's interesting about the Marshal's death is that this is a character we've gotten to know. Like, we have these kind of first deaths, like there's the plane crash, and then there's the captain.
Yes.
Who is the first kind of...
Pilot, you mean?
The pilot. Captain, it's not a boat. The pilot who gets eaten by the monster who, like... we get to meet him for a little bit, and also he's again a figure with power. He knows what's going on. He lives just long enough to give them the information, and then he dies, which is really funny. And then we have this Marshal who we get to know over the course of a few episodes, and then he dies. And even in the pilot, like in pilot part 2, you're still like, well, he might be okay. Because, like, Jack's performing surgery on him, and in the pilot episodes, he seems fairly confident that he's going to be okay.
Yeah. And
he's
also
like, I just
the
need to
amount
perform the
of
surgery.
Emergency surgeries that this man has performed
Oh my god.
in the last 20 minutes.
Poor Jack. Oh my god.
This man can work miracles, you know?
Yeah. No, definitely. And
so you're like, oh.
you're like, he's going to be okay.
Plot armour as well.
And plot armour, yeah, you get this thing of, especially like in this episode, you're like, oh, he's significant. He's important to Kate's backstory.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he will. And that's the thing, and so he just dies. And it's an interesting thing in terms of the tone of the show.
Yeah.
That, like, we don't see him anymore.
I also think the actor must have had so much fun making all of those moaning,
oh my god,
noises.
yeah. Doing all that screaming, getting covered in all that blood. Must be fun.
Yeah. Also, the actor plays, like, the big villain in the first season of Supernatural.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
That's fun.
That's fun. That is fun.
He's like a demon character, right? So he's like super evil in that as well, and he's got yellow eyes.
Oh,
and they
funky.
don't know his name, but they call him Yellow Eyes. It's fun.
That's fun. So I bet he had fun with that. And that must have been a similar time period as well, like,
yeah,
right?
I have a feeling he's kind of like typecast as villains.
Yeah.
He's nice with an evil face.
He is nice with an evil face. He's got a very much villainous sort of
that's
look
an
about him.
Adventure Time reference, by the way.
Yeah, nice with an evil face is from like the third episode of Adventure Time.
We just throw these into conversation casually. You'll get used to it. We're gonna just at this point, I don't think we've said anything original in years. I think our entire vocabulary is made up of different cultural references.
We converse via quotes from things a lot of the time.
Quite literally.
So, yeah, it's funny, you see the first thing you wrote down was the Marshall. One of the first notes I have written down for this episode is just that the concept of a printed headshot is so funny to me. Mugshot, headshot. Like, the concept of it being printed out and put in his pocket.
It is
because
weird.
It's like, not only, because I mean, as far as I'm aware anyway, I may be remembering wrong, but that mugshot surely is something that was taken after he arrested her.
Mm-hmm.
So why does he have it? I mean, maybe he has it to, like, show, I don't know, to show the airport security or something?
In case they don't believe him.
But, like, it feels to me a bit more like a power play, like him being like, I've got you. And, like, obviously from a narrative perspective, they had to find out she's a criminal somehow. Like, and the picture is how we find out that it's Kate who's the criminal. But I just think the concept is really funny when you think about it. Because it's like, why does he just have that in his pocket?
Yeah.
It's just really funny.
Yeah. It is a bit weird. And, like, the fact that it's like just a normal piece of paper as well. It's not like a photo.
It's not like laminated. It's not like... Yeah, just a regular folded
bit of paper.
He's
gone to Boots and printed out his, 5x4s or whatever
he's not been in Ryman's. No. He's been...
Bro has gone to a photocopier.
He photocopied it at the police station.
He's faxed it.
He faxed it in.
To himself.
I think that's just really fun. It's a wildly long intro in this episode as well.
Yeah,
very long. We get the previously on, and we get... a lot of stuff because we get Jack and the Marshal, but then we also get immediately following the last episode, we get the group coming down from the mountain.
Yeah.
Before the intro.
An incredible line from Saeed as well in this opening
fabulous,
bit.
Yeah.
What's knocking down the trees will get you.
What's knocking down the trees will get you.
What's knocking down the trees will get you.
Yeah, because that's what Sawyer says. What do you think, the trees are going to kill us? Yeah. No.
What's knocking down the trees will get you.
Incredible. The scene, I think, according to the way I've written my notes at least, the scene immediately following the intro is actually where one of my favourite quotes, but also it's the same thing, from Boone, which is, he doesn't even believe in guns, he goes on marches. I don't go on marches! That it's just so funny.
Oh, it's a bit silly.
I love when they get just a bit like...
Boone is such an odd character.
Boone is so...
Why was he trying to lift the gun off Saeed?
I think Boone seems to have this idea of, like, he thinks he's more important than he is, in narratively. Like, I think we see it come up a couple of times later on in the episodes that, like, he likes to take it upon himself to do things. He's going to be like, if no one else is going to take charge, I have to do it. But it always goes badly for him.
And also, everyone else is taking charge.
Everyone else is taking charge, but he wants it to be done his way. Yeah. Like, he's like, I have to steal the gun because we can't trust Sawyer with the gun, which, fair enough, to be fair.
Yeah, but Saeed's got it.
Yeah.
What is it? Oh, he's weird, man. And then also, why is he, like, getting defensive about not believing in guns?
I know, that's really
don't
funny.
go on marches.
I think
What?
I think he thinks it makes him not look cool.
Yeah.
I think it's a funny thing that, like, Boone and Shannon are supposed to be, like, early 20s. They're supposed to be, like, our age. Bit older than us.
So.
And so it's like, and like Boone is a little bit older than, he's like 2 years older than Shannon, something like that. That it's like we get, that I think a lot of the way Boone behaves is that he's like, I'm around adults and I need them to think that I'm cool.
Yeah.
Or I need them to think that I'm like important or like manly or whatever. I think he gets that, caught up in that a little bit, quite a lot.
Yeah, I think he does.
And I think the idea of being surrounded by people who know how to use guns, and then she's like, he's against guns. He's like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
It gets very, like, sort of teenage, moany, you know.
But it's ridiculous.
Whiny
'cause,
stuff,
like,
which is really funny.
Yeah. The fact that we may have said this before, but the fact that there are guns on the island anyway. I'm
It's
just
so
like,
American.
Really?
It's so American that there are guns in it, because, like... And it's a great thing that Charlie, of course, has the great line about the guns. How to use the gun. I think you just pull the trigger. Because he doesn't know how to use guns.
Oh, side note, we got an incredible piece of English swearing from Charlie this week.
Did we?
Bollocks.
Bollocks! I didn't hear him say bollocks.
It's in that early scene.
Ah.
I can't remember what it's in response to now. I think it's like, he says something, and then Saeed says, no, that won't work, and he goes, oh, bollocks.
Yeah.
My theory is that Don Monaghan ad-libs all of these.
I think so. There are quite a few instances very early in this series, like first sort of 10 episodes of this series, where we get Charlie doing some great British swearing. Mm-hmm. We get bollocks, we get wanker, we get ponce, which is a great one. And I also think as well, it's interesting that like the strongest universal swear that we really get is bitch.
Oh, they love saying bitch on this show.
They love a good bitch. But we never get anything more than that. We never get like a shit. We never get a, you know...
I don't think they ever say fuck either.
We never get a fuck. And I think it's interesting because I would rank wanker quite high up. And bollocks.
In
like,
terms of age rating.
Relatively high up on the thing. But I think because it's an American show, it kind of slips by.
Yeah.
Which I think is just really interesting to think about in terms of like the ratings and the scripting and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I do find it so funny because it clearly is so obvious that bitch is like the only thing they're allowed to say because it's used so much.
I think they get, what do they get? Do we get ass a few times?
Oh yeah, we definitely get ass.
We get, Hurley calls Sawyer a chain-smoking jackass. That's a good line.
Very funny.
That was in the last episode. I really enjoyed that.
the opposite of bollocks. You know,
Yeah.
it's so American.
It's very American jackass. No, I think
yeah.
it's very fun. I love it when we get Charlie gets a lot of really fun Britishisms that we really enjoy.
We do.
That like they're just like thrown in there. That it's nice as well that like if it is written in, that it seems like there's a little bit of research done. You know, they don't just try and explain it away. Like there is a couple of times.
Maybe,
where
but this is why I believe that they're improvised because I think he was just throwing them in.
No, I agree with you on that. And it's I love Charlie, and we love Charlie because he's English, I think, a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But also I love Charlie.
I think he's like the comic relief, really.
Definitely.
Like, in this episode, there's that one random scene where he goes over and bothers John, and it's just like...
Oh, I love that scene. He's like, my band.
I once used tribal flutes or whatever, and he's like, I'm in a band.
In my band.
So funny.
Charlie loves to bring up his band.
He
And
does.
also, Charlie has some great pathetic moments in this. I like his terrible flirting with Claire. Combined with his
think-
really undignified suitcase lifting. It's like, the flirting in itself
It's
fine.
one of his best moments.
It's one of
which
his
is
best
saying
lines.
something, because it isn't great.
It isn't, but it's
the
the fact that
flirting
he's
goes
like...
downhill from here.
He's like, oh, your husband? And then, like, heaves a suitcase onto the floor. And it's like, thunk, and he drops it in a really undignified manner. And I'm like, you're not helping cases. Like, I think in his head, he's like, a strong man helping the woman. And it's like, Charlie, no.
Charlie, babe.
Charlie, that's not what's happening. And it's just really sweet, and it's really fun, and I like it.
So going back to the beginning, this kind of dark scene that's on the side of the hill, I've written down here, Kate is already so done with Sawyer.
Yeah. We get the first instance of freckles in this scene,
Yeah.
which is something he calls her for a lot of the show. And also, which really frustrates me because, like, she doesn't even have that prominent freckles.
No.
And, like, genuinely, I think it wasn't until series 3 I finally went, she doesn't even have freckles. And Dad was like, yes, she does. And I genuinely got up close to the TV screen and I was like, okay, well, now I can see them.
Yeah.
But, like...
They're definitely not her salient feature.
They're not her strongest feature. They're not something you notice. It's...
And it's when he says freckles, she shoots him the best look.
Yeah, we also get, we get our first non-plain flashback
Yeah.
in this episode, which is setting our kind of tone that all the episodes following have these kind of regular off-island backstory flashbacks.
I like the balance in these early episodes between flashbacks.
There's a lot
and
more
on-island.
kind of on-island stuff.
There aren't that many flashback scenes, and I think that's good. I think the
Yeah.
reason there ends up being more flashbacks is because they run out of things to do on the island.
Yeah, I think you get a lot more like random minor character scenes as well, like stuff like with John and Charlie.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have
Yeah,
happened.
that doesn't really happen in the later seasons.
Every scene kind of serves a purpose a little bit more.
Yeah.
But we get like a lovely subplot that I love in this episode is between Michael and Walt and John, which is really, really sweet because also it's like when Michael is like, you're like, he has every right to be completely concerned. It's like this random like man is suddenly talking to his son and his son won't even talk to him and he's like, what's going on? And I like that, like Walt is kind of like, oh, it's whatever. And Michael's like, no, what is he saying to you?
Yeah.
But then, of course, when John comes and wakes Michael up and says, I found your son's dog, then you get the kind of like, there's a bit more trust between them then.
No, that moment is lovely when you figure out that he's making the whistle in order to
Oh,
find
I
Vincent.
remember seeing that for the first time. It was so sweet. Because, like, John's this sort of mysterious, you're like, you don't know what he's doing. And then he blows that whistle and Vincent comes running out of the woods. And everything about Vincent always makes me cry.
Yeah. Every scene with that dog.
Every scene, that dog is the best actor in the show.
Yeah.
Always making me cry. Like when he came out of the forest and like lay down and was just like looked so happy and I was like, oh,
He was so cute.
it was so cute. We get an interesting thing when the group from the mountain come back. Saeed kind of takes charge really, really well.
I wrote this down too. Saeed is in his leader era.
Saeed is like taking charge, and I think I've seen a few sort of takes online saying Saeed really should have been the leader. And I think like, maybe if Jack had died in the pilot, Saeed kind of would have taken up that role because he does a really good job of like explaining it without like they keep it secret about the French woman, but they don't just lie. Like he explains it and he's like, okay, we need to do these things, we need to get water and we need to get food and we need to get the electronics, and he kind of delegates it to people.
He's definitely the person I think with like his head screwed on the most.
Yeah, he's got like the best survival skills.
100%.
He's doing a really good job at like trying to get them off. I think at this point a lot of them have kind of resigned themselves. Like Sawyer has a line of being like, you've got to
They're not coming.
wake up, no one's coming. And Saeed is really persistent about we don't just have to give up, we can try again.
But he is doing it in such a way that's very smart because he's like, we can't let people give up hope.
Yes.
So maybe necessarily in like himself, we don't know, maybe he does.
Maybe he doesn't believe it, but he doesn't want to let people panic. And it's this great kind of, he's like, we're doing this thing to help us get away, but also we're rationing our food and also we're collecting water. So it's like, if you combine those things, people aren't going to freak out.
Completely. And I think that's where Jack fails in some respects.
He's very sort of narrow-minded, I think. He focuses on the one thing.
But also he's not as good at kind of like, he lies to the group, but not in a convincing way, or do you know what I mean? Like he's not
Yeah, no, I do know what you mean.
Saeed does a better job of
he just doesn't have that kind
telling
of
people what they need to know rather than just being like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
In an awkward way.
He doesn't like there's no suspicion that Saeed is hiding something.
No. I think that's what I was trying to get
That's it. That's what I think you were going
Jack
for.
is a bad liar.
That's
basically what I'm trying to say.
Very much so.
Kate goes and immediately tells Jack.
I know, that was very funny.
And that is an omen of things to come. I feel like this happens all the time.
It does happen a lot.
Everyone seems to think Jack has to know everything. And but also Jack then falls into that, and when he doesn't know something,
when he doesn't know something,
pissy.
he freaks out. He's like, why did nobody tell me this thing?
But yes, Kate immediately
goes and tells Jack. But also, you know, it's also like Jack is very important to like
why.
Kate and to that narrative. And also, I think she's also like, I need to subtly find out what's going on with the Marshal.
True.
So if I come to him and go, I have information. Anyway, how are you doing?
Yeah. This scene between the two of them has what I like to call some classic Foxy acting in it.
To be clear, that's Foxy as in Matthew Fox,
Fox.
not Foxy as in
No.
sexy.
No. But they call him Foxy.
They call him
like
Foxy.
the behind the scenes stuff, so we think that's funny, so we've adopted that. But so I'm gonna do my best impression of Matthew Fox's acting style. Are you ready?
He does a lot of looking away. He does a lot of squinting. Does a lot of opening his mouth.
Yeah. He loves to look away, sort of shake his head a little bit, and then look back into the conversation.
Yeah.
And once you notice it, you can't unsee it.
No, definitely.
And in this scene, he's doing it massively.
He does it a lot.
He's laying it on thick.
This is where we get our first representation of my weirdest personal headcanon over a character, which I haven't actually told you about. So,
Okay.
this is my, you know, like the weird, it's like the subjective Guess Who, like the weird, tiny, niche things that I'm like, personally I believe this about this character with little to no evidence, is that personally I believe that Jack has hay fever. Because as a bit of context, I have really bad sinus problems and I have hay fever that like affects me all year round, and in times like this where it's warm and it's summer, I'm suffering. And that I often, it's the squinting and the open mouth that I'm like, because a lot of the time it's taken me such a long time to realise that often I can't breathe through my nose.
Right.
Because I was just like, it was a couple weeks ago, I sat down and I was like, why is it that I constantly am breathing with my mouth open at the minute? And then I shut my mouth and I went, oh.
You can't breathe.
I can't breathe otherwise. But it's like you don't notice you're doing it.
Of course.
And also like when like your sinuses are hurting and when your eyes are getting blurry and stuff, you do a lot of squinting. And so often when I look at you know, Foxy and his squint acting, I just think like he has hay fever.
Hay fever boy.
He has sinus problems. And I think, you know, if I'd been crash landed on a tropical island, can you imagine?
Oh yeah.
I would be having such a horrible time. My sinuses would be going insane.
You'd be like rooting through the suitcases like, where's my sinus
I'd
rinse?
be like, antihistamines, please! I'd be going to Jack and I'd be being like, listen, I know the Marshal needs the antibiotics, but do you have any, like, cetirizine hydrochloride, please? I'm dying over here. And so that's my personal stupid headcanon over Jack, is that he has sinus problems.
Like, I see myself on screen?
I do, I feel represented. I do. It's really emotional, actually, to finally see myself represented on screen.
Oh, I thought your eyes were just watering because you have hay fever.
Oh, no. So yeah, that's my little headcanon of him.
Incredible.
I touched on the scene in the plane.
Yes, that's what I wanted to talk about as well. I really like that scene.
I love that scene where we get, like I was talking about with Kate and Jack being kind of presented against each other, that we get Sawyer and Jack presented against each other as like Jack is looking for medicine and Sawyer is looting for beer, and he says it himself. He's like, well, there you go, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I'm the bad guy and you're the good guy.
Yeah. I mainly like this scene because of the cinematography, though.
Yeah.
I think it's done in a way that is actually quite, like a horror.
Yeah.
I think right at the beginning they focus quite a lot on this kind of like thriller, scary aspect of it, and the kind of reveal of him like squatting up in the kind of like overhead carriages with the torch underneath his face. I'm like, actually, yeah, that is actually one of Sawyer's creepiest in terms of that moments.
Yeah.
He's very creepy in many other respects.
Creepy in a different way, but that's like a sort of scary,
a horror movie kind of way.
That is definitely, and that like complete darkness that they're surrounded by in that place.
It's such a contrast as well because everything else is so sunny.
It's very sunny and very bright, and also like knowing that plane is full of dead bodies.
Yeah.
Like that plane, that's what even Hurley says, and that's a really funny scene from Hurley. Is the oh, I don't want to go in there, there's the bodies, and Jack's like, I'll deal with it, why don't you go? Yeah,
no
okay,
worries.
yeah, got it. Then as I think often Hurley says what the viewer is thinking.
Yes, he definitely does.
And that is one of those moments where you're like, I don't want to go in there.
Yeah.
And then Jack goes in, and also, like, there's a moment of Sawyer where he says, like, he's like, you gotta face it, they're not coming. And he makes some good points where he's saying, don't waste all the antibiotics on the guy who's gonna die.
Yeah.
We might need them.
But it's callous, isn't it?
It is callous, it's very harsh, and also it's the way he says, like, I'm in the wild, and he's stealing cigarettes and
Great
beer.
accent, by the way.
Thank you. He's stealing cigarettes and beer and magazines.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sorry, are you in the wild?
No, I was not.
No, you're not.
Where is he?
In the wild. He's in the wild. He's not.
Yeah, so true.
He's smoking and he's drinking and he's not, foraging in the woods.
Yeah, he's not roughing it, exactly.
And I just think it's this really stupid, he's got this perception of himself that is just not the truth at all. That's not the truth, Ellen.
So let's talk a little bit more about the flashbacks in this episode.
Okay.
So I think, first of all, they're scripted in a really fun way. I think the script's really good, and, like, I really like the dynamic between Kate and the farmer. I think they have a really fun relationship.
I'm a big fan of everyone who's Australian.
Yeah, me too.
In the show.
We love all the Aussies.
We love the Aussies. I think, like, it's a really funny thing that the plane has come from Australia and there's only one Australian on it.
Ridiculous.
But we get, like, the flight attendants and the farmer and stuff. We get a lot of Aussies and it's nice. Mm-hmm. I like them all. I think they're all always quite fun people as characters.
Yeah.
This guy's really interesting.
Yeah. And I like the way that she's, like, ravenously eating all the scrambled eggs and stuff.
Yeah.
And, like...
Yeah.
The fact that he's got, like, a prosthetic arm that's kind of not, like, it's made, like, it's not ignored.
Yeah.
But it's also not necessarily plot relevant. Like, when he revealed they had a prosthetic arm for the first time I saw it, I was like, okay, that's going to be relevant somehow.
Chekhov's prosthetic arm.
Chekhov's prosthetic arm. But it isn't,
It's not really, no.
And I kind of like that.
It's just that, like, it comes off while she's pulling him along, but it's like, it's not
just to kind of
a
add
big deal.
to the drama of that scene, but it's not necessarily...
No, I like that. I like that it's just a thing about him. It's not, like, a big thing.
Yeah.
And I like also, something I've just occurred to me, is that Kate introduces herself as Annie. Mm-hmm. That could be her real name. When she first says that, she could have been lying to everyone on the island, and that could be that's her real name, because the marshal never refers to her by name. He just says, where is she?
Yeah.
It doesn't... I think it does say her name on the headshot, maybe. The mugshot.
But you wouldn't necessarily
But
notice
maybe.
that. Because I thought that when we first watched it.
Yeah.
Because it's only when she says, my name's not
Annie, that then you know...
Kate is her real name.
Kate is her real name.
And actually, that's quite a, like, powerful thing in itself. It's very tabula rasa on topic, because when she gets on the island, she decides, I'm not going to lie anymore.
Yeah, she decides to use her real name.
My real name. And she is lying, because she doesn't tell them that she's
of course lying, but it's more the idea that she gets to be herself.
She gets to be herself, she gets to...
And you just think, we don't know. She gets to,
author her own soul. And we don't know how long she's been on the run for. We know it's been long enough that she's gone to Australia. Yeah.
So we don't
Canada as well.
From Canada, which is a very long way. How long has it been since someone's called her by her real name?
Such a good point.
Could have been years.
Wow.
It could be ages since someone has called her by her name, that then finally she gets to be herself again.
Yeah.
Which is really quite nice. I think the flashbacks are really, really nice.
And can we just talk about the scene where they're in the cars? So this is interesting because it's really poignant from what we were talking about morals, because it's like this farmer is lovely, he's taken her in despite the fact that she's trespassing on his land or whatever. She doesn't know, he knows nothing about her, all of this. But then he sells her out.
He turns her in, yeah.
He turns her in for the money just because he has one hell of a mortgage. I love that line as well.
Yeah.
One hell of a mortgage.
Chekhov's one hell of a mortgage.
Lost really predicted the housing crisis of the 21st
I bet his mortgage
century.
is worse now.
Anyway, and that's like a really poignant scene, and I think Evangeline Lilly does some really good acting when she's kind of putting two and two together when they're in the car.
Yeah, and
But
she does a very fun job of sort of not freaking out.
Yeah.
Is that just like, how long have you known? It's like,
Yeah.
almost like she knew this was going to happen.
Yeah.
Like,
predicted it, and I think that's very in character for Kate as well,
Yeah.
because she's just always on the run. But then the marshal rolls up to the window and finger guns her. What the fuck?
yeah, it's really weird. It's really strange. I know what he's going for is the kind of like, hey, it's me.
Yeah.
I'm back. I'm here. I've got you. Whatever.
Well, I think it's like an intimidation thing as well. It's like, time's up. But it looks goofy. It looks so goofy.
It's really stupid. And then he does it like again. They
cut back to it,
and they
yeah.
cut back to it, and he's there, and it looks a bit like, you know, like a kind of 80s movies when they like roll the window around and they're like, "What's up?"
Yeah.
That's like, and I'm like,
That's not. No.
no.
What are you doing?
It's so funny.
It is very amusing. And then when he actually puts the gun to her neck after the crash, I think that's pretty
That's
cool.
really, yeah. That like that's shot really brilliantly in that like you get the big like truck coming past.
Yeah.
And then it's empty and it's
you're
just the
like,
guy.
she's free.
And you're like, she's got it. She just has to cross that road and then she's got to run. And he's just on the other side of the camera and she can't see him and neither can we. And then he comes up with that gun.
Yeah, I think that's really
And
good.
also the gun is obviously very important because then the gun
That's the gun that
is
ends
what
up
they
on the
use to
island.
kill him and what they
Yeah.
use to kill the polar bear.
Oh, I never even thought of that. It's his own gun.
Own gun that Sawyer shoots him with.
Oh.
Sawyer's right, it is almost poetic.
Also, don't they have more bullets? He's like, oh, we've only got one bullet, but when Saeed teaches Kate how to take apart the gun, he says, like, remove the magazine from the thing.
I think Saeed still has... I don't know.
So hasn't that got more bullets? I mean, I don't know how guns
I don't know how
work.
guns work.
I mean, I know what a magazine is from playing Resident Evil.
I know he says there's one round still
And
in it,
on
doesn't
Resident
he?
Evil, that has 15 bullets in it, so...
I don't know, maybe. Maybe they don't have any bullets left, I don't know. But there's one bullet in the gun.
Yes, I know that. But I was like, surely you have more bullets. They can just go back to the forest and pick them up, or
Pick them,
or maybe
get
they
them.
left them. I don't know.
Maybe Saeed left them on the mountain, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, it's
I've got a question for you though.
Go on.
Did she mean to flip the truck?
Interesting.
'Cause
I'm not
she
sure.
grabs the wheel, and I'm like, okay, she sees her opportunity because the marshal's car has gone behind her car. I get that. But that seems quite dangerous to fully flip the car.
Yeah, I don't think she means to. I think what she means to do is pull the car off the road and then get out and run away. Because I don't think... Because we know that she doesn't want the farmer. She doesn't hate him. She doesn't resent him. She saves him, and then she was, of course, going to ask the marshal, make sure he gets his reward. So she wouldn't want to hurt him. So I don't think... I think
what
maybe
I'm
that just
saying.
happened. I think she's probably not thinking too straight. She probably doesn't have a huge plan. She's just... Because, like, if her plan was to get out and run away, the marshal's still in a car.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, he's
gonna catch her.
Yeah.
She's obviously just panicking.
Yeah.
But I don't think she meant to
Because
flip
I was
it
like,
over.
it's very dramatic, but damn, that is, like, dangerous.
Because also
girl.
she
You're
could have just
injure
died in
yourself.
that.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
she could have just straight up gotten crushed.
Exactly.
And I don't think she's the type to be like, I'd rather die than let him take me.
No, because she's already immediately thinking of a way to get away from him.
Yeah.
Like, she's always on the run.
Yeah, no, definitely. We've talked about a lot of the later stuff already.
Yeah.
But something in regards to Kate and her, you know, the criminal aspect of her, that scene at the end with Kate and Jack on the beach, I think is really interesting, mostly so because it is so frustrating for the viewer.
Yes.
That she goes, I want to tell you what I did. And he says, I don't want to know. And I don't know about anyone else, but I was like screaming at the screen. I was like, no, I want to know.
Yeah,
Tell him.
Yeah.
Because I want to know what she did, because we know she's on the run, but we don't even see.
No.
So we still don't know. We still, it's almost like this weird, it's like, I don't know if I got this kind of, it's a bit of a moral fixation. It's a bit of a like, but should we hate her or not? I need to know if she did something bad.
I like that.
But then that kind of like
the viewer into a bit of an intense
a bit of a dilemma of just like, you have to decide now for yourself if you think she's a bad person without knowing.
So it's almost like Jack talking about the blank slate and the fresh start is an instruction to the viewer.
Yeah, take her as she is.
Yeah.
Don't judge her.
I like that idea.
Based on...
Look at us. Aren't we smart?
Yeah, I think it's just like, it's so interesting. And also, I think coming from Jack's perspective, because he's had this whole moral high ground of, I'm not a murderer.
Yeah.
And then he's had to go in and be the one to kill the marshal. That I think now he's...
I mean, that's a massive thing for Jack.
A huge deal for Jack. And that I think for him, he's now thinking, like, it's not as big of a deal as he thought it was. Like, he understands a bit more. And it's just, like, he doesn't need to know.
I think that's kind of the point. You know how Sawyer says to him earlier, like, you've got to let go of the real world.
Yeah,
we're in the wild.
We're in the wild.
This is kind of his moment where he's like, I'm not in a hospital anymore. I don't have the correct drugs and nurses and scalpels to save this man. Now I am in the wilderness. I'm in the desert island. The rules are different.
Now things have changed, and maybe the outside world isn't as important anymore.
So yeah, that's definitely.
No, I think it's a really poignant scene between them. And it's like an iconic image. Those two sitting on the beach, that's like a big iconic like picture as like a representation of the show, and I think like it's fun to see that, you know, to be like, oh, that's what that is.
The picture.
I know that one.
yeah. So let's talk about this end sequence. I love this end sequence.
The end montage.
First of all,
beautiful.
First thing to address, were people still using portable CD players in 2004?
I think I had one when we were little. I think it was
oh,
like...
yeah, you did?
Yeah, I had one that I used to listen to my Disney CDs on when I was like 5, which would have been, 2009? 2010? I just did the wrong... I was literally born in 2005, I just did the wrong math. 2010. So I think it is... Yeah, I think that is like recent technology. Should we have a look? Let me have a Google.
But in my head, it seems like quite an old thing. Because I'm thinking about that one episode of the Goldbergs as well.
Yeah.
Where they get one. So obviously that's set in the 80s.
But they're like not very good. It says, launched in 1984, portable CD players, popularity exploded in the 90s. The introduction of the electronic skip protection in 1997 led to it having a must-have status. Okay. So maybe it's a little bit old, but I think the iPod wasn't a thing yet, was it?
Was it not? And MP3 players and that. Because I had one of those when we were kids.
But that was a bit later than I had the CD player,
wasn't
wasn't
later.
it?
It was like, I was like 12 or something.
Well, this also says 1997. Became even more portable in 2001. How big were they? So I think it was maybe a turning point of like, people still use CD players, but people sometimes had MP3 players as well.
Yeah.
But of course, it's a CD player because it's the Desert Island disc, isn't it?
Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
So this is Hurley's Desert Island disc.
I didn't put 2 and 2 together until you said it just then.
So that I think is why it's a CD.
Also because of the kind of like, you know, an iPod might have broken in the crash.
Yeah, iPod.
A portable CD player. They're not the most robust.
They're not
piece
particularly
of technology,
robust.
so I don't know.
But the right at the beginning of this end montage, I had a very a less relevant to the ending of the episode thought, which is that I noticed they've all kept their shoes on. Because Hurley, he takes his shoe off and he's like emptying sand out of his shoe.
Yeah.
And I've just come back from a beach holiday, and I tried to keep my shoes on. And when I tell you, they were immediately off. I'm like, walking on a beach in shoes is so impossible.
Yeah.
Me personally, I would have taken them off immediately. Like, if you're going up into the jungle, you put your shoes back on.
As we know, Kate had to get the boots.
But, like, surely they're all covered in sand right now. No wonder they're all so irritable. Can you imagine?
They're all at each other's throats because they got sand in their socks.
Yeah, they're like, my socks are wet.
What's that vine where it's like, cut the music, someone left
ice cream on the ground and it melted and now my sock is wet. Who the fuck wanna die? Literally me. And I was like, they all keep their shoes on. And I think that's interesting because obviously like, I mean, it's probably they probably didn't really think about it.
Yeah, it's probably just that they were like, let's costume the show, let's give them all shoes.
And like, I know it just means like for continuity they can have the same outfit on or whatever, but
yeah, it's a bit weird when you think about it.
It is weird when you think about the fact that they're like living on a beach.
Yeah.
You'd think maybe they'd not have shoes on. But yes, I love this.
So I have no idea what song is playing on this montage.
I don't know.
Should we do a quick Google?
Something, the lyric is like it's gonna wash away. No, it's called Wash Away.
No way.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
Joe Purdy's Wash Away.
There you go. So I'd not heard the song before, but I think it's quite cute.
Yeah, no, I think it's a nice song.
And it really nicely overscores this montage.
Definitely. I think it's a really nice montage. Everything's framed very well. There's some great kind of framings of pairings. In that obviously we have the Koreans, who we've seen a little bit of in this, we've seen a bit too much of in this episode.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that. I think that scene is wonderfully awkward.
I think it is. It is brilliantly awkward in that Michael must know she doesn't speak English, but he's still kind of
he's like blabbering on. Yeah. He's
I didn't see anything. I thought someone was chasing me, but and it's the way that like the noise like immediately stops, and so it's like.
And she's plays that sort of deadpan really well as well. She's just like...
She's just looking at him. She just clearly doesn't know what to do. It's the like handing the shirt over is so funny. Because she doesn't move her hand and then he kind of walks up and like places in her hand and then just keeps walking. It's just such a funny scene. Yeah. And that when we get a little bit of care between the Korean couple in this montage for the first time, where like previously it's been a bit like...
Yeah, it's all
animosity.
Again, with the kind of like it's very difficult to tell because we see so little of them at this point.
Yeah.
You kind of have that scene in this episode where he says, your clothes are filthy, go and clean yourself up. But then he says, like, I love you. And to me, that's him manipulating her. I'm like, this doesn't seem right at all. But then you see her, like, him, like, brushing her hair out of her face while she's asleep. But then she's asleep. So I'm like, so you only care about her when she's not conscious.
Yeah, so then it's like, maybe he's trying to, like... Maybe he is trying to be genuinely affectionate, but then it's like, maybe he's not.
But it's still kind of a bit controlling. Like, I don't know, it's all very weird.
All very complicated, and obviously we know so little about them.
Yeah. But that's
a lot of the scenes
it keeps you thinking.
Absolutely,
it's like, what is the dynamic here?
And also, as well, a lot of the scenes we've seen them in, we don't get subtitled. So we don't even know what they're saying half the time.
Yeah, I actually, I did kind of notice this, but it was confirmed by the audio commentary that we listened to. That whenever it's a scene with just them two talking to each other, you get subtitles. But when it's one of the Koreans speaking to someone who speaks English, you don't get subtitles, which I think is really cool because A, love a good bit of lack of subtitles. I think that's really fun. And B, it's kind of like... you know, you are like the people on the island because it's assuming that the audience doesn't speak Korean. But if you don't, you're like, you've got no idea what they're saying and they've got no idea what they're saying. Yeah, no, you get that experience of just having to figure it out. Yeah. Which obviously, from their perspective as well, that's how they're living this whole thing. They're trying to figure out what everyone else is saying. They've got no clue what's going on.
They're trying to figure out what everyone else is saying, you know, all these big speeches Saeed is making. I think actually one of them is right at the front during that scene, and I was like, they don't know what he's saying. You know, they're standing there, obviously trying to just figure out what's going on. Yeah. And that must be so scary.
We went on holiday to France this year, and we went to this wonderful place called Nantes, and on this little kind of... in this town? Is it like a little town? Yeah, I hope to say so. There's this place called the Ile de Machine, and basically it's like a big sort of like... It's not really like a theme park or anything, is it? It's like an exhibition.
It's a bit more like a sculpture park.
Yeah, it basically they have lots of steampunk mechanical animals.
Yeah, they've got an elephant, they've got a bunch, and then they've got like a carousel that's a bunch of sea creatures and boats and stuff.
Yeah,
and
it's really fucking cool.
I'd highly recommend it. It's so cool.
Look it up on Instagram. Yeah, the Machine. They're so cool.
They have this warehouse.
Yes.
Where their next project is they're building this big tree and they're making a bunch of creatures to put in the tree. There's like caterpillars and birds and spiders
It's
and
all
stuff.
insect vibes.
Yeah,
and basically what they would do is they lead like a tour around, and you get to see all of these animals in action, and sometimes they get like kids to be volunteers to go and operate them or whatever. But obviously it's all in French. Now I did GCSE French many years ago, but my French is not that great, and you did GCSE Spanish, so you got even less of a clue.
I did Spanish, so I don't even speak any French.
So we were very confused while this was all happening. We were kind of just watching it, but it's really fun when you kind of listen to a big talk like that in a foreign language, because some of it goes in, some of it you just absorb, and you kind of get the vibe from the tone of voice and the reactions of people around you and stuff.
Yeah,
and I was
it's one of those things where you can think about like the way people speak, that often
Yeah.
you can kind of pick things up. And it's something I noticed while we were in France. There was a moment at a train station where I held my ticket out to the man to scan it, and then he said something to me in French, and I obviously had no idea what he said, but I just like, I went on my phone, I turned my brightness up, and I offered it to him again, and he scanned it and it worked. And I was like, entirely based on the social situation, I know exactly what he's told me. I know he's just said turn your brightness up, but I don't know what he said. And it's really great how you can pick those things up just based on what they're saying and what other people are doing. That like actually you can get a little bit of that communication without even trying to speak to each other.
Yeah, so I'm imagining that the Korean couple felt a lot like us, listening to Daphne go and operate a giant caterpillar.
Yeah.
We're like, wow, really interesting.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Also, you just stood there like...
In his stanced up. He loves to put his hands on his hips.
He loves a good stance.
He loves a good hands on hips moment.
And also, can we talk about... We talked about Kate's dirty tank top in the previous episode. His tank top is pristine, mama. It is gorgeous.
Saeed's lovely white tank top. He's I mean, he's a little bit muddy, but it's like, it's not yellow.
No.
Which is what's happened to Kate's one.
I love Saeed's.
No, he's great. We get, in the montage, we get Saeed's ponytail for the first time.
Yeah!
I've written Saeed ponytail, 3 exclamation marks. I love it when Saeed ties his hair up.
It looks so good.
It looks really good, and I also think it's a very fun thing. Like, a lot of the... Not so much now, but, like, as it goes on, a lot of the men's hair gets a lot longer. And, like... And this is he's the only one who really ties it back, you know? And I like it. I always think it's fun. And that's when he, of course, throws the apple to Sawyer.
See, that's such an important moment, isn't it?
It's such a lovely moment.
To me, that's like... That's really... we talked about the different ages of the different characters. And I always think of Saeed as one of the kind of older characters, like, kind of in his sort of mid-30s, I would say. But... I mean, I'm not sure what age he's supposed to be, but he's certainly one of the most mature characters in the show.
Definitely.
And here it's really showing that he just takes the moral high ground.
No.
It's like, this guy's been a dickhead, but honestly, I can't even think about that right now.
That, it's a really lovely thing from him that, like, this guy, and, like, in the regular world, he would be so threatening. You know, like, if Saeed was in, like, I don't know, LAX airport, and they'd gone off the plane and they'd had that argument where Sawyer had called him a terrorist, he could have been arrested and he could have been shot. You know, like, that's a really dangerous thing. But him being able to just be like, but we're all here and we have to share our food and we have to share our resources, otherwise we're gonna, you know, we're gonna die.
And he's basically also saying, stop being so petty, stop being a bitch. This is when they should have used bitch to describe Sawyer. He's a massive bitch.
He's such a bitch. He's like a piss baby is what he is.
He is a piss baby.
He's so... And it's that moment of connection that then there's this great look of shock on Sawyer's face as well, where he's like, oh, okay.
He has to reassess.
He has to then reassess that, like, Saeed isn't gonna, like, take the bait and have a massive feud with him.
Completely, because Sawyer's whole thing is, like, being aggressive, so everyone...
Provoking people.
...is aggressive back to him, and he kind of thrives off that, and it's, like, just diffusing the situation, it's like,
just not rising to it, just going, we have to share.
Also, I really want to know how that throw was filmed. Because I imagine that it's someone off camera throwing the apple to Sawyer, and... But it's so perfectly...
so seamless.
It's like... I was like, damn.
I know. I wonder if there's outtakes of that.
Yeah.
There's one great throw in a later episode that I'm desperate to see outtakes of. But that's a very specific thing. But I was going to say...
Hint for later.
A little hint for later. Stick around and you can hear me talk about that. It's not for like another 2 seasons. But also I was going to say there's this framing of pairings in the montage where we get the Korean couple, and there's a fabulous shot of Charlie that I never kind of appreciated this, but it's Charlie and he's got the like, what is it? Is it like...
It's like masking tape.
Masking tape around his fingers that he's writing.
We've not really thought about that, because I was very confused by...
I don't really understand
To be honest, I think the reason they've done it is to kind of give him a bit of a quirk. Again, it's like the kind of horror movie thing. Just make something a little bit creepy about him.
Yeah.
And give him these like masking tape fingers and stuff. And obviously fate, that's quite a creepy word. But then he changes it to late in this montage, doesn't he?
Yeah. Which is interesting.
Yeah, I don't really know the symbolism of that.
Maybe we can unpack it a little bit later on. Maybe we'll once we delve a bit more into Charlie's character, maybe something will come to us.
Maybe.
But what I thought was really lovely about this shot is it's like a moving, it like kind of pans across a little bit.
Yeah.
And he's writing, and he's got like the lid in his mouth, and I think it's quite nicely done. But then in the background, Claire is sitting in the sand, like, you know, with her like hand on her bump, and I think it's a lovely sort of framing of them as a pairing.
Yes.
Where they're not quite, you know, friends yet, they're not quite anything, but they're still together in this moment, but they're doing their own thing.
That is quite nice.
And I think it's a really nice kind of acknowledgement of like, these are our groups, these are our people who are doing things together, but they're not, and I think the framing of it is really cool, because he's like in the mid-ground, like nothing's in the front, but he's like in the mid-ground, then she's further back. Mm-hmm. And like you don't necessarily notice her straight away. I think it's a really nice way of incorporating them all in.
Yeah.
But then I also wrote down, while making notes about this, was they framed the couples, and then I've just put Saeed and Sawyer doomed Yowie ? Because it feels like all the other people in that... But then, of course, I mean, immediately after that we got Michael and Walt, but it was like, before that, it was all couples.
Isn't it Yuri for men?
Yuri's girls. Yuri's women. And then I was like, maybe they're hinting.
Maybe.
Saeed and Sawyer, doomed Yowie. They would the toxic Yowie of all time.
Oh my god.
If they'd pursued that would be insane.
That'd be ridiculous.
Crazy.
It's Jack and Sawyer, obviously.
And then we get Walt reuniting with Vincent to end it.
This is such a beautiful moment where you get like, obviously the dog is so cute. Walt is so cute.
And the dog is so cute, and he's just so happy.
And I noticed as well that Michael and Walt do a little fist
They have a little like high five thing,
which is really cute.
And that's the kind of piece between them.
Yeah.
Where Walt, and of course the hilarious scene earlier on of, I'll go find your dog as soon as the rain stopped, and then it starts raining straight away.
And I love the bit where he's monologuing in the forest. He's like, "Oh, that was a good idea, wasn't it? Just go find it as soon as the rain stops." That like they've been butting heads so much, and now they've done it together, and that John acknowledges that as well, and he says, you know, I thought it would be nice if you brought him back to him. So I want to talk about John a little bit here, because obviously we know very little about him. We've had like a few sort of creepy moments, like the orange peel and like the conversation with Walt, and then we have the secrets. So we find out in this episode that the secret that he told Walt is that a miracle happened here.
Yeah.
Now that's very interesting.
Very interesting, because then of course Michael counters that with, a miracle happened to all of us, we survived a plane crash. Which is, of course, correct. You know, they're so lucky to have lived.
But because John is such a mysterious character, you're like, something else is going on.
There's another layer to this, 100%.
We don't know. And he's very ambiguous as well, because so you get that one scene where he wakes up Michael and he says, I thought you should be the one to give the dog to your son, which is obviously lovely and really shows like his sort of awareness of Michael and Walt's dynamic. But then right at the end of this montage you see him watching them with a very sort of like blank but kind of furrowed eyebrows expression,
almost like a sort of, what's the word, like
a
morbid
scowl.
Like a sort of
and the music distorts
and then goes silent.
Creepier. So I'm like, girl, what is the signals? I'm getting mixed signals here.
Something's going on.
How are you?
Like something is going on with this guy.
It's really
this like
hard to
Mr.
tell.
Locke as well. That's how he introduces himself.
Yeah,
Mr. Locke, which is, I mean, that might just be, you know, he's a child, so he call me by my surname, but it's a bit sort of an enigma-y thing. He hasn't said much. That scar, that cut down his face,
a bit creepy, but
is
cool.
so, and also it's still like bright red, and against his like white shirt, and he's got like, I don't know, like khaki cargo pants on, like his like very sort of clean appearance against like the really bright, the cut, and that doesn't, like, it kind of pans round him and you get his other eye first, which I think it's interesting from a framing perspective. Yeah, no, it's all very, very creepy.
We're left with a big question.
We're left with a big question: what's happening to him
over Mr. Locke? Which, a little hint for next week, we're going to find out a little bit more about him in episode 4.
We are, and we're going to find out. Maybe we're going to find out what the miracle was.
You'll have to wait and see.
So
I think, yeah.
I think that's everything I have to say about this episode. I really loved this episode. I love being able to delve a little bit more into the characters, a little bit more into the moral dilemma, and the depth of the show. And that, like, I think it's difficult because I love the pilot so much, but a lot of what we see from the characters is just these establishing moments. These, like, setting up the characters and the show and, like, the tone of the show and who the characters are, and it's not until now that we finally get to, like, build on that.
Yeah.
You know, it feels like we've had the perfect foundation built, and now we've finally, you know, we're building the house.
Yes.
And now I can talk about the furniture. I don't know.
The metaphor kind of falls apart, but you see what we're saying.
You know what I mean.
Yeah, I really liked this episode too. Definitely, like, I would not have even thought about it as up there in terms of, like, best episodes of the series or anything like that, but I actually really enjoyed it, and I think it's also kind of nice that, like, Kate is the first person that we get flashbacks for, and proper backstory, because of course you get things like Charlie's heroin addiction and the fact that she is a fugitive in the pilot, but, you know, we think of Jack as the protagonist, but actually Kate is the first person that we learn about. Really have an episode that focuses on her.
No, it is a really interesting way that they reveal these bits of backstory as, like, what is the most immediately relevant.
Yes.
Because it's like Jack's backstory. Obviously, we're interested in Jack.
Yeah.
But we know he seems a bit more like an open book. It's like he's a doctor. He doesn't seem to have any secrets. He's trying to help people.
Which is not necessarily true.
Not necessarily true.
Series,
but this is kind of what we see.
Like it.
But then when we get Charlie, is that we get the heroin addiction is, like, immediately relevant if you're on a desert island. Like, it's immediately important.
Yeah.
And finding out that someone's a criminal is immediately important.
Yeah.
And it's less so that then later on you go, hey, what's up with this guy? So where did you train medically?
Yeah.
Like, it's a little bit, it's these things that are less important to you straight away, which is interesting in comparison to, like, what you would consider being, like, you reveal the main characters first and then go into the smaller characters, which is still kind of how it works.
Yes.
But it's an interesting thing. And also, like, with Kate being the first flashbacks, what's funny is that I always, like, if you say Tabula Rasa to me, I will go, oh, that's the John episode. Because, of course, it's John Locke's philosophical theory. And it's not.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, you get his story first, but you don't. You get Kate, and I think it's an interesting, it's a really interesting moment of that she's the first person we really, really learn about what her life looked like before the plane crash.
Yeah.
Because, of course, we kind of know about Charlie because he talks about himself.
So true.
Because the other characters don't really, like, he's very eager for everyone to know he was in a rock band. Yes. And he wants someone to recognise him, and he's really, really desperate for someone to be a fan.
Give me Beth's number, I'll call her up.
Exactly. And he's, like, so excited to tell people that then it feels like we know him. And then we get the heroin addiction, and that's, like, the whoa, crazy. But even at this point, like, I feel like if that episode had contained flashbacks to his band, it wouldn't necessarily be something we'd be interested in seeing, because he talks about himself.
Yeah, with Kate it's a lot more mysterious.
She's very evasive about answering those questions about who she is and what.
So you're sort of looking at it as, like, the flashback is the only way we're going to find out about her life.
Yes, this is what it seems.
As a viewer.
Is that as a viewer, some of the characters are much more eager to tell us who they are, and some of them we need to be shown. It's kind of what I'm getting at. Yeah, definitely. And I think Kate is very much, she will not give details about her life, like, voluntarily. And so we need to know about her really early on, and we need to see her backstory. And what's interesting is that really we don't learn all that much about her story. We know that she was being chased, and we know that when she was arrested, but we don't know what she did.
No.
We don't know how long she's been running for. We don't know anything about any of her, like, family or any, you know...
Or why she went to Australia.
Why she was in Australia. We don't know any of that. And all we know is how she got onto the plane. We know that, like, she was finally caught.
Yeah.
But we don't really know any of that. So it's like, it's kind of like we've been given crumbs, you know? They've been like, this is a bit of what's going on with her, but you're gonna have to stick with us.
Definitely.
To finally
That's
find out.
That's how they keep you in.
Definitely.
But
It's how they
also,
reel you in.
I really like that we've had... I mean, I feel like I'm just repeating myself now and going on about it, but I never really noticed how few flashback scenes you actually get.
Oh,
in
yeah,
this
there's only
episode.
about 3,
Yeah,
isn't there?
which is crazy because I really like that kind of drip feeding thing, you know. It's like, no, we don't actually know that much about the farmer, right?
No.
Or the farm, or her and how she got there. Yeah, it's
Yeah, and we don't see her in the airport. We don't see, like, you know, actually being arrested or anything. It's literally just like the gun to the head moment,
and then
we're back on the island.
Plane, yeah.
And then the next thing we see is her, you know, cuffed to the plane drinking the juice. Chronologically, obviously, it's not that we saw that first, but you know what I mean. No, I think it's really, really, really interesting that early on it's a lot more focused on the island and what's happening there, and we just get these little, like, drips and drabs of what's going on in the background.
Because what we're really interested in is the island.
Is what is in the woods and what's with the French lady.
The thing knocking down the trees is gonna get you.
That's what we're interested in.
We're interested in her.
And that, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really great way to do it.
Definitely.
Where they're not going, hey, forget about that.
Yeah.
Look at this.
Did you know
like,
she's a criminal?
like, they're keeping those things in, like, tandem, and they're both being built up. And then it's like you get a little bit that then when you get the next thing, you're going to be more interested in seeing it. And then you get this, like, teased idea of eventually we're going to tell you what happened. But right now, what's more important is this guy's dying.
Yeah. So sadly, the last we see of the Marshal on the island.
It is. He's dead.
He's dead. I feel like we should take a moment, you know, to appreciate his potential as a character, what he was, what he could have been. The Marshal whose name we don't even know.
So that's this episode.
Thank you so much for listening. We've had a lot of fun today.
I've had a great time with this episode.
I've been battling heat exhaustion this entire time.
Yeah, you didn't pass out.
I know, I'm so hot.
What a victory. I know, I'd
boiling.
love to go get a drink. My knee hurts from the way I've been sitting, but I can't put my leg out.
Anyway.
But I've had a great time. I've really enjoyed talking about this episode, and I'm really looking forward to talking about next episode.
Oh, I love next week's.
Next episode is one of my we say this one would not be rated by us, this episode. Next episode, always in my top 10.
Highly rated by us.
Always in my top 10.
It's a great app.
It's so incredible. And with the way the background, the flashbacks are constructed next episode, genius and incredible.
We are going to be gnawing at the walls. It's so good.
So
we're going to get feral next episode, so that's you know, definitely a reason to listen.
Yes, so I look forward to speaking to you all next week. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Please, you know, follow us on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram at lostallcaps-podcast.
Yeah, TikTok, Tumblr.
Yeah. Oh, there's some underscores in the. It's like at lostallcaps__podcast. You'll find it.
Yeah. Where everything is under Lost All Caps in terms of name, things like that. We'll be there.
Follow me on Instagram, Ariel Hebditch.
And Velvet Hebditch.
Yeah. I'll be doing stand-up gigs and such.
Yeah.
So, you know, follow me for more details on those. I'm also part of a sketch troupe at Spruce Moose Comedy. We do stupid little skits on Instagram and TikTok. So if you're
Yeah.
into that, then you can see me on there as well.
It's all very funny stuff. And yeah, and without further ado, I guess we'll
See you next
see
time.
you next time. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Mwah.
Dun-dun.